One of the worst things about the media, the left, and the Young Turks specifically is that they continually treat you like you're stupid. Like you don't have a memory that goes back further than a couple of weeks. Like you are not aware of ancillary information connected to the topics that they're butchering and presenting to you, pretending to be news people. A perfect example of this is the way that the Young Turks covered the events on Capitol Hill. Where were you when this event happened? I was at a car dealership. No, I didn't get a car. Frame damage doesn't happen from parallel parking. Tragic. Let me know where you were down in the comments down below. Let me know where were you. Now, we've already discussed that fateful day in my previous video. If you want to see my thoughts about it, I'll link that video in the description box of this video. I'll also put it in the iCard. You can also click on my channel, go into my video logs, and find the video just before this video, and that video will be the video where I discuss the pictures and videos that happen on that fateful day of the topic that we're talking about. But in that video, the video that's before this video, that will be linked in the description box, the iCard, and when you click my channel just before this video, I promised you that we were going to cover the hypocritical takes. I promised you that we were going to talk about the people who have no right to morally grandstand about this event because they had been providing cover for about a year for BLM and more significant riots and continuous riots that have been happening across the country. And chief among that is the Young Turks. And they put out a video that is absolutely glorious where they're going to condemn the cops for their lack of an authoritarian-like response against the protesters. And they're going to make the case that the cops were not only aligned with the Trump people, which could be possible that they like Trump, but are actually white supremacists. So we're going to go over that. This is the video. Get ready for it. Buckle up. Get in your seat. We're ready for it.
One of the topics that I saved for the end of the show it has to do with the policing that took place, or the lack of policing that took place as domestic terrorists stormed the Capitol, breached the Capitol building several times. That led to a shooting. A woman was shot and killed amid the chaos.
Now, I hate to stop the video right here at such an early point. Wait, that's not true. I absolutely love stopping the video right here this early on because it's important to point out that the key information that Anna is omitting when she says somebody was shot during the chaos, a woman was shot during the chaos, is that this information, had she included it in her video, would completely undercut the entire purpose and premise of the video because this person, this woman that was shot by the police, was shot by the police. She wasn't just randomly shot in the chaos, which leads you, kind of makes you believe that maybe she was shot by one of the people invading Capitol Hill, according to Anna. No, it was the police, and since this video is all about how the police didn't respond with enough force, this will completely undercut everything Anna's going to say going forward.
And so what was going on? I mean, if you look at video footage of the absolute chaos, you'll notice that it didn't seem like cops were doing much to control the situation. They were ill prepared.
And here we find ourselves in one of the great paradoxes of policing. If the police show up in force, if they're actually out fully in riot gear, and they're making their presence known and they're deterring anything from happening before it really gets started, the police will be accused of using too much force on a peaceful protest. They will be accused of cracking down too hard when it was totally unnecessary because nothing went wrong. However, if the police have a lighter presence, if they're trying to let the protest happen, let people exercise their First Amendment rights, and then it goes bad, all of a sudden the police were unprepared. Why weren't the police here? Look, everything went crazy. It's not like there's a direct correlation sometimes and a lot of times with the police presence and how the crowd will react seeing that there are more cops or less cops. It's the fact that the police let this happen. So this is all nonsense.
And so what was going on? I mean, if you look at video footage of the absolute chaos, you'll notice that it didn't seem like cops were doing much to control the situation. They were ill prepared. They were outnumbered by these domestic terrorists. And so
yeah, Anna's totally not rambling. That's definitely not a nonsensical point about the Capitol Police, about how they were unprepared and outnumbered. It's not like the police in these situations are always outnumbered because there's more people generally at big events than there are police officers in a department. No, that's a fair, legit, thoughtful criticism of the police. I mean, the Capitol Police only has 2,300 officers, so anytime you have a crowd over 2,300, by definition, they outnumber the entire department, let alone the people that are working there that day. But Anna's totally right. The police allowed themselves to be outnumbered in this situation because they're probably aligned with the right wing. They probably supported the coup. That's why they only had 2,300 officers in their department and were outnumbered.
They were ill prepared. They were outnumbered by these domestic terrorists. And so, how could that be when there have been threats of violence regarding this very day for weeks now? It's pretty strange.
It's really strange how one number can be bigger than another number.
They were outnumbered.
It's pretty strange.
It's pretty strange how basic math works.
They were outnumbered.
It's pretty strange.
It's really strange that there aren't more people working on duty for the police than there are in giant crowds in any given situation. Really strange.
But I also think it's important to look at some of the video footage we've seen on social media of cops being incredibly friendly to these domestic terrorists. Let's start off with the first video, which features some selfies taking place.
ACAF.
Great. So, John, literally taking selfies with some of these people, breaking all the rules.
So 3 things. One of them is going to be really important. 2 of them are going to be not so important. Number 1, when you take a photo with somebody else, that is not a selfie. A selfie is a photo you take of yourself. This is just a photo where the guy is holding the camera and he's taking it with the police officer. Very important. I thought I needed to make that distinction up front because that is the crucial point. 2, Anna Kasparian looks unusually angry based on the footage that we just saw. This is her reaction after cutting back from that clip. It's just a guy taking a picture with a cop. And 3, and you guys might think that this is the most important, but I could argue that even though factually it's the most important, it could be less important than those other 2 points that I brought up. There's not really anything popping off at the time that this photo is taken. All Anna Kasparian is showing is a guy taking a photo with a police officer before there's any type of danger or threats or any indication that things will be escalated in that region. Do you see people shoving cops? Do you see people even yelling at cops in an aggressive way? You just see citizens going up to the Capitol. By the way, you are allowed to enter the US Capitol. You're allowed to protest in the US Capitol. Where things went wrong was when a group of people within this group started destroying things within the US Capitol. Some goofy people brought zip ties. There were other reports of other sketchy things going on, but overall, you are allowed to protest members of Congress and you are allowed to protest them inside the Capitol building. There's certain restricted areas that you can't go into. Obviously, you can't make threats, blah, blah, blah. We all get that. But you're allowed to enter the Capitol building. It's just factually untrue that they can't do this. And by the way, they're right at the door.
I mean, if a black person was accused of trespassing, that's all the right wing would cite as justification for a cop shooting and killing them immediately, even if that person didn't pose an imminent threat. In this case, we're talking about armed people breaking into the Capitol building, and you have cops taking selfies with them. Yeah. I mean, the white supremacy within our law enforcement is just so clear. Go ahead, John.
And Anna has the nerve to call this white supremacy within our law enforcement. First and foremost, there is no indication whatsoever that the guy asking to take a photo with this police officer is a white supremacist. As discussed before, there's no indication that anything is really popping off at this point or in this area, or the police are aware of that. And on top of that, need I remind you that the police knelt with the Black Lives Matter rioters multiple times. Now, they didn't do it while they were rioting, they did it while it was peaceful, but they did it after there were clear nights of violence and rioting on behalf of the BLM and Antifa types at the request of them, because you act differently in situations when it doesn't appear there's a threat to when there does appear there's a threat. It's absolutely absurd for Anna to say that this photo makes it seem like the police are aligned with white supremacy or aligned or allowing violence to happen. Remember, at the beginning of this, I pointed out the police shot one of these people. They shot a white woman.
I mean, if a black person was accused of trespassing. That's all. 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 That's all the right wing would cite as justification for a cop shooting and killing them immediately.
Now, I need to also add that Anna's just making stuff up and rambling incoherently about how the right wing would justify the police shooting a black man based on trespassing. And she's talking about how these people are taking selfies with armed protesters as they break into the Capitol, when she's showing B-roll that contradicts that. First of all, the door's open, they're right in the front of the Capitol. They clearly just walked in through the open door and took pictures with the cops. You are mixing up footage of people who are not destroying stuff with people who are destroying stuff. Remember, where there was broken windows and there was somebody breaching an area where they weren't supposed to, the police shot that person. They shot the person that you said was shot during the chaos. No, that's not what happened. The police shot a MAGA person for violating a law or a regulation or an order from the police officers. They were trespassing in that situation, according to Anna, even though it's very questionable about whether or not it's trespassing to enter a public building. It's probably some other crime because it's a restricted area, but I don't think it technically falls under trespassing. But then again, I have to look up DC law to really find a ruling on this.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we point out hypocrisy all the time, and what we look for is consistency, and this is at least consistency.
Can the Young Turks actually be this delusional? Is this real or is this a parody? John Iadarola of the Young Turks says that the Young Turks points out hypocrisy all the time. Anna and John right now are being hypocritical and they don't notice it. I don't know how this can be real. I don't know how this can be genuine, but it feels genuine. John, you are not the people pointing out hypocrisy. You are the hypocrisy that gets pointed out to other people. You're the example that other people look to and say, we don't want to be like that. Everything about your brand and everything about your network and everything about your words is hypocritical.
What we look for is consistency, and this is at least consistency.
John, you don't look for consistency, you cherry pick. That's what you do for a living. And the idea that the cops always love the right-wing protesters is kind of undercut by the fact that the police shot one of these protesters. They shot her immediately. They would not have shot a BLM protester under similar circumstances. Remember, we just went through an entire year of the police giving ground and allowing BLM rioters to destroy property consistently, and they shot a woman within a couple of hours of this situation starting. They also called in the National Guard day one. Remember, we just went through an entire year of Democratic governors, mayors, and all these officials refusing the National Guard and saying it was authoritarian to do so, but when it's the right wing, they call them in absolutely immediately.
The cops always love the right-wing protesters. They always do. They love them so much that they're willing to overlook things, like storming the building they're defending, or routinely ambushing and murdering cops, or plotting to overthrow the government, which would involve killing tons of them. They're willing to overlook those things.
So John wants to criticize the police for being too kind to right-wing protesters when objectively they were not. And one of the things he's criticizing them for is routinely overlooking people who ambush police officers. Remember, the Young Turks inspired the events at Baton Rouge. It was a member of their audience. That guy ambushed police officers in Baton Rouge. On top of that, the Young Turks have been providing cover for Antifa.
They said all this stuff about, Antifa and Black Lives Matter, they're so violent. Where? What?
Antifa, an organization that promotes communism, technically wants to overthrow the US government. That process will involve killing a lot of people. They talk about this all the time, and the Young Turks overlooks that. Can you be any more hypocritical, John Iadarola?
So I want to also address something, because I'm seeing some people make the argument that, well, they were outnumbered, so what were the cops going to do? No, I totally recognize that they were outnumbered. That's not what I'm specifically talking about in this story. I'm talking about cops taking photos, selfies, with these domestic terrorists. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about video footage showing them literally opening the barricades to make way for them, to allow them to come in. That video exists. John mentioned it before we went live, and I watched it. It's out of control. They encourage this in some cases. The cops love this.
So now we're just in conspiracy territory. I've looked over these videos. The police were not letting people in to attack the Capitol. They were opening up barricades for people who were protesting, or at least people that the police thought were protesting. In other videos, the police were engaging in what is called strategic retreats. There were reports and there's video of other officers that were trying to hold their ground that got overwhelmed by this crowd. When that happens, when you're in a bad position to defend yourselves, it is perfectly rational and strategic and intelligent to retreat to a more defensible position. The idea that we're going to criticize the police for these actions is absolutely ridiculous. Now, because of YouTube's terms of service, I can't show you any of the physical confrontations between the police and the people at this event, but I'm going to show you the footage I believe Anna Kasparian is referring to. Now, as you can see right here, this does not look like the police opening the barricade to let these people into Capitol Hill for any conspiratorial purpose. This just looks like them opening the barricade for possibly a strategic retreat, or possibly to direct the crowd in a certain direction. I'm not too familiar with the geography of Capitol Hill, so I don't really know where this is, and you can't really tell from this video footage. But Anna Kasparian is perfectly comfortable referencing this video. She doesn't show it to you because she doesn't have the honor to actually show you what she's talking about when she's referencing it, but she references it even though this is the equivalent of pushing a conspiracy theory because it's unverified information. We don't know exactly where this is, we don't know where the police were directing these people, and we don't know the purpose behind them opening the barrier. However, when you actually look at the footage, rather than have Anna Kasparian describe it to you, after she's already said the police are aligned with white supremacists, it doesn't really show exactly what these people are trying to say. It looks like something that could be perfectly normal under certain circumstances.
So there's a case we made that in some cases, hypothetically, they could have escalated the use of force, but these are insane terrorists who are armed to the gills that haven't yet started other than once shooting people. So maybe if you don't do it, then less people die.
So people keep saying that these people were armed, but I didn't really see armed people coming into the Capitol, which is not unusual because you can't really open carry in the District of Columbia. So maybe there were some photos or some people that were individuals that were armed, but I find it really interesting that they keep emphasizing that they were armed, but the footage I'm seeing just shows people shoving and pushing. Maybe they had like sticks, maybe he's meaning armed in a sense that we're not talking about firearms, but I don't really or haven't really seen that so far other than a couple of photographs that I don't really know what I'm looking at. So let me know. I'm not saying that nobody was armed at all. In a crowd this big, I expect somebody to be armed, but I haven't really seen a lot of that.
But these are insane terrorists who are armed to the gills that haven't yet started other than once shooting people. So,
but this sentence is something I really wanted to highlight because this video came out on January 7th. It was pretty clear on the day of that the person who was shot in this whole mess was somebody being shot by the police. However, the Young Turks upload a video the day after, and I understand it was probably shot the day before when they did this segment, but they upload this video the day after, implying that the protesters are the ones that shot somebody when there's no evidence of that. If I ran a news organization, first of all, I would have had that information by later in the day, which everybody else had, but I also wouldn't upload false information and a video that is completely contradicted time and time again that hinges upon that false information. But hey, I'm just a guy on my own. Why am I expecting standards from somebody who pretends that they're running a news organization?
And why are they so ill-prepared, especially when not too long ago, just this past summer, we saw how much preparation there was in Washington, D.C. for BLM protesters. Let's take a look at some of those photos. Because if you look at those pictures, night and day, lack of policing in the Capitol today in response to these right-wing extremists and terrorists. But when you look at these images of law enforcement in Washington, D.C. during the summer, this is June 2nd, 2020. Oh wait, Americans who are being brutalized by cops want to say something about it, want to change the system? Oh no, we got to be prepared for that.
No, Anna, no. You're not going to pretend that the police were somehow harsher and firing indiscriminately on BLM. She's talking about this photo and how it took place on June 2nd. Remember, BLM started rioting right after George Floyd died, basically in late May. So this was already 5 days into rioting, and where these police are guarding the Capitol, or actually more accurately, they're guarding the Lincoln statue. The reason they're guarding this is because BLM, after consistently rioting and destroying cities and ripping down statues, were planning on targeting this monument. So the idea that the police would have the same level of preparation for Trump people who have never rioted before as they would for BLM even on June 2nd, when again, they were at least 5 days into rioting in multiple cities across the country, including Washington, D.C., is not unusual. Past behavior dictates future outcome. And again, let's just remember that the left celebrates the fact that over a 90-day period, Black Lives Matter only had 7% of their events turn out into riots. Meanwhile, that was 600 riots over that 90-day period and nothing to be celebrated, but that's something that they minimize.
No, they came ready for that. They had no problem snatching people up off the streets and putting them in unmarked cars. They had no problem raining terror on both demonstrators and journalists in the summer.
They had no problem snatching people up off the streets and putting them in unmarked cars. First of all, she's talking about Portland. Portland, where people were rioting for 100 straight days. And they're talking about the federal police that were wearing police uniforms, picking up people that were targeting a federal courthouse. They were targeting that federal courthouse repeatedly, and nobody was doing anything about it. In fact, the mayor of Portland only recently, this year in 2021, condemned Antifa by name. When the federal agents were trying to protect the federal courthouse, the mayor was fighting against them. He was trying to push them out. He was saying that they were authoritarian, trying to defend their federal property. You contrast that to what happened today, where the National Guard is called in immediately, and nobody is against it, and all of a sudden you get a clearer picture about who's actually allowed to cause damage and destruction in this nation, and it's not the right wing.
How are they ill-prepared for today? And it's because it needs to be investigated. But honestly, in order for this stuff to be investigated and for the right actions to take place, you need Democrats to fight.
So I've reached a level of insanity that I'm willing to tolerate from a single Young Turks video right about here. How they managed to turn a story where the police responded with force, shot a protester almost instantly when she breached that area, and the National Guard was called in same day into a police were not forceful enough is mind-numbing. How they managed to make the police and law enforcement the villains of this event when they actually lost somebody during the course of this event is cruel and just shows how nasty these people are. Let's be clear, anybody trying to make the point that the police were somehow less harsh on these protesters than they were on BLM and Antifa has not been paying attention. They're either dumb or they're completely ignorant of what went on this past year. Remember, Antifa and BLM were trying to storm the White House for multiple nights in a row, and the police never resorted to using lethal weapons against these rioters, even though the situation got so bad that at certain points the president had to be moved with his family into a safety bunker. And by the way, John, if you're still looking for consistency and you want to point out hypocrisy like you do all the time at the Young Turks, why don't you look at the person who's on the other side of the screen? Because Kasparian, in this exact same situation that I'm describing, when the president had to be moved into the security bunker, made fun of him, kept calling him bunker boy. He's such a coward for going into the bunker.
Trump himself is ensuring that the White House is boarded up and the bunker is ready to go for Election Day. The fence is actually the exact same fence that was put up during the protests that took place over the summer following the murder of George Floyd. And if you guys can recall, that was when Trump also decided to hide out in his bunker. And then when he emerged, he needed to hide behind federal authorities and federal agents.
So I will not be lectured to by Kasparian, the partisan hack who thinks it's okay to surround public buildings and threaten the people inside, depending on which person is actually inside and being threatened. And if you were actually interested in highlighting hypocrisy, you would play a compilation of the media reacting to hundreds of days of BLM riots in this nation versus their reaction to this event.
I want to be clear in how I characterize this. This is mostly a protest. It is not generally speaking unruly.
That ain't a riot, what we're seeing right now in Minneapolis.
They are strictly principled anti-fascists, and they've taken a principled stand to stand against white supremacists and white nationalists wherever they may show up.
I argue to you tonight, all punches are not equal morally.
It says it right in the name, Antifa, anti-fascism, which is what they were there fighting. Listen, there's, no organization is perfect. There was some violence.
Any reasonable person would say we shouldn't be destroying other people's property, but these are not reasonable times.
But thank goodness for the looters, man.
And please, show me where it says that protests are supposed to be polite and peaceful.
I don't care that much about statutes.
Shouldn't that be done by a commission or the city council, not a mob in the middle of the night throwing it into the harbor?
People will do what they do.
You're seeing behind me is one of multiple locations that have been burning in Kenosha, Wisconsin.
Do not get it twisted and think that, this is something that has never happened before, and then this is so terrible, and where are we, and these savages and all of that. This is how this country was started.
People get mad and people get sick of it. People are risking COVID to explain to this country that we're fed up.
Most of the major movements in American history have started at the grassroots level and at some point have turned into direct conflict with American government. So remember your history before you judge your present.
Thuggishness is thuggishness wherever it comes from politically, and we should be the first to call it out.
I disagree.
But hey, those are just my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you liked the video, then show me by leaving a like. You can subscribe for more content. Follow me on all my social medias. They are linked in the description. This has been me talking about Anna Kasparian and the Young Turks having no moral high ground to stand on whatsoever. Till next time.